everyone, my name is Kent C. Dodds, and I'm joined. Oh, I forgot to ask how you pronounce your last name, Josh.
Como.
Como, that's right. I think I've asked you that in the past and just forgot. I was telling my wife this morning that I'm going to meet with Josh, and I'm looking at my calendar. I'm like, I can't remember how to say his last name. Yes,
It's French.
Josh. Sorry.
It's French, and that's what's tricky. Is it ends with an E and an A and a U, so it's 3 vowels, and it's pronounced as an O, which makes no sense if you're not doing some more French.
I don't think I'll ever forget how to say your name now. That's great. So Josh and I go back several years. I think I met you at I think I met you on Twitter first, and then we've met at conferences and stuff.
Yep.
And yeah, it's just been a pleasure to follow you. I'd love for folks to get to know you a little bit before we talk about Whimsy. So yeah, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Josh. I'm a software developer in Montreal, up in Canada. I've been doing web development stuff for quite a while, but working as like an IC software person for about 7 years. I recently left my job at Gatsby. I was a staff software engineer, and I teach part-time at Concordia University in partnership with Journey, teaching boot camps.
I didn't realize that you were teaching at a university. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, the cool thing about it is it started as a local startup, the same as any other boot camp, and they reached out and they've partnered with a local university. So it's not part of like a typical 3 or 4 year like bachelor's degree system. It's part of their continuing education department. But essentially, we work with them. The classes are held on their campus, and the students get a diploma from the university, which I think helps. It's even though the curriculum is really quite similar to what you'd find at any boot camp, the fact that it goes through Concordia and the fact that we have grades and we hold people to pretty high standards. Yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I've been working with them for a couple of years now, and I work at the part-time program. So it's 14 hours a week for the students. And what's interesting about it is that it's built in such a way, like it's the evenings on Tuesday and Thursday, and then most of the day Saturday. And so most of the folks that do this are often like not like they're in their 30s or 40s, and they're coming, often they have families and kids and complete lives, right? Like they have a full-time job and they've realized they wanted to do this. I've also worked at the full-time one, and with that, granted, this is a generalization, you find both types of folks in both groups, but in the full-time one, it's a lot more of like folks that are either like just out of high school, just out of college, like early 20s looking to start their careers. It's super satisfying, I find, working with folks who are later, like, looking for a second career.
Yeah, I'm sure they're
really
like,
interesting.
For me, I know that I became a lot more motivated. I actually was married and started having kids when I was still in my last couple of years at college, and I became a lot more motivated. I can imagine people with those kinds of responsibilities are likewise more motivated.
Yeah, they take it super seriously, it's great to see.
Yeah, very cool. Wow, that's awesome. So what do you teach them?
So it's, we have 5 modules. I mean, the stack is just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Redux, and Mongo. So and Node. I forgot to mention Node. So it's a full stack thing. It goes over 8 months. So it's it's the equivalent of a 12-week boot camp in terms of the number of hours. Like 12 weeks full-time turns into 8 months part-time.
Yeah. Wow. That's and do you teach all up and down the stack, or like are there multiple people that teach different parts?
I'm the like main instructor, and then we have a few technical coaches. But yeah, essentially I work with the full-time instructor on the curriculum. So I developed the React portion, but I'm using his portion for most of the other. And like we both make tweaks as we go. But yeah, it's been fun to cover the whole stack like that. I consider myself mainly a front-end person, but I've done enough work incidentally on the back end that so far so good in terms of covering it and being able to teach it.
No, that's awesome. Wow, how fun. Very cool. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I think that's just I personally feel like educating other people is a really noble thing. My wife is a elementary ed graduate. She taught 2nd grade before transition to being full-time mom, and my mom was a teacher. I have several sisters and sisters-in-law who are teachers, and I guess I'm a teacher too. So yeah, I really think that education is wonderful. So that's great. I didn't know that. And I wanted to talk with you, transitioning to our main topic here. I wanted to talk with you about Whimsy. And the reason that I think of you as the Whimsy guy is, aside from the fact that your website is full of whimsy, and I'd like to talk about the different things that you've done on your website, But the first talk I remember seeing of yours was about Whimsy. Was it at React Rally or React Conf? I can't remember which.
It would have been React Rally.
Yeah.
I've spoken at a couple conferences, but the two that I do most years is React Rally and React Europe.
Yeah. Isn't React Rally just, it's my favorite conference. I love it. Yeah.
It's been a great time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be nice for you too, because you live in Utah, right? So it's like right around the corner for you.
It's very convenient too, which is quite nice. I can sleep in my own bed. Well, actually, the last couple of years, I don't think I did. I think I slept at the hotel, but because it is like a 45-minute drive. But
right.
Yeah. Anyway, I haven't missed a year of React Rally. It's a fantastic conference. So yeah, in your talk, you kind of I should have watched it before having our conversation, but I remember you show a bunch of really interesting demos and kind of justify the idea of like why Whimsy should be included, or maybe we could even talk about what Whimsy is, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about why Whimsy is a useful aspect to applications, and what types of applications could use Whimsy more than others and that kind of thing. So what are your thoughts around Whimsy?
So yeah, the talk was called The Case for Whimsy, and it was really like my attempt to make a reasonable, like, you know, like here's why we should spend time on this stuff, because it's so easy when you're working on a project to overestimate how much or underestimate how much work it'll be, and then look to cut the scope to make it so that you can still ship something. And like immediately the first thing that goes is like all of the nice interactions and animations and like moments of delight in the process. And of course that's totally justifiable, and I think that it's the right call a bunch of the time. But I think it adds so much to the experience. And I think that I can come at this from a few different angles, but the one that I lean on the most is native apps have really, really good experiences and feel really, really nice to use. You know, Whimsy can be a lot of things. It can be like confetti explosions, but it can also just be really thoughtful interactions and just really smooth organic animations. And the fact that like when you click on something, it doesn't just immediately show you a white screen and then immediately show you everything else. There's like smooth transitions. All of that stuff combines to like an overall feel of quality, and it affects how people view the thing that they're using, especially when they have this contrast when they go on the web compared to like most native apps that really prioritize this stuff. The like big picture thing is it's worrying to me a little bit if we don't kind of compete on that level, because there's so many reasons that the web is great. And I would hate to like lose that if everyone starts getting so used to native apps that they try to avoid web apps. I think that there's, granted, you know, who knows how, there's so many factors that go into it, not least of which is like the fact that using the web is so low friction, right? You can just go to a website and it's like immediate. So that's like a really strong selling point too. But yeah, so, and the other question I wanted to get to was like, which types of apps benefit from this? I've actually changed my mind a little bit since I gave the conference talk. In the conference talk, I was saying that like anything can benefit from it. And an example I gave was for an email client, that when you like compose the email, the like little modal that pops up folds up and then shoots off into the inbox. And it was this like really adorable flourish. You know, that still may be a decent idea. But what I've come to realize is that like, if you're working on a government website or something that is, you know, like, a serious thing. It's not always the most, you know, it can be a little inappropriate to have like really delightful experiences during really serious things. And more than that, I think, so I read this book called Technically Wrong by Sarah Bocher. I have no idea how to pronounce her name. But like she makes the case that companies use like delight as this sinister way to like get people to give up their privacy and ultimately take advantage of them. I've always thought of it, and I've never worked for a huge company, so I've never really had to weigh that like moral dilemma. I see now that there is, like anything, right? Like there is ways to misuse this. And I always feel like the reason that you should have this is partially for what I mentioned, which is to have your web app feel professional and be, you know, comparable to the mobile apps people are used to. But also because there's like an emotional component, right? Like if you want your thing to be memorable, it helps if it sparks some kind of emotion. And we see how people take advantage of like negative emotions, right? That's why headlines are always so horrifying, because people really like, you know, well, they don't really like it, but they find themselves drawn to reading things that make them angry or frustrated.
Yeah.
There's like a positive version of this, which is if you can spark a bit of delight, it makes what the person is doing a little bit more memorable, especially if it's surprising. Right? So like in the email example, when you click send the email, you're not expecting it to fold up, like you're just expecting it to disappear. And the first time you see it, it's like, oh, well, that's neat. And I think that that's helpful, that it reinforces the moment that you're having, and it makes you remember that this application exists and teaches you how to use it, right? Like, especially if you integrate some of this stuff into onboarding, it makes it really easy to teach people how to use the thing if you can spark these little bits of emotion that make it more memorable. But all of that to say that there is definitely like a sinister version of this where you leverage the emotional reaction to do something that people would otherwise not be all right with. So yeah, I want to be conscious of it's not always the most appropriate thing.
Yeah. I suppose that like if somebody was paying their bill online, they wouldn't want to see like a giant sack of money appear and like see you later. It's like I was going to use that for medicine, like that. Yeah, that's probably not always appropriate, but where it is appropriate, it's lovely. And I just your website has some awesome whimsy. You added sound to the web, where like I've seen some websites that have little sound effects, but like you have this this hook, use sound, that makes it easy for people to do that. Do you want to talk about like what are some situations where sound on the web enhances the user's experience?
Yeah, so I use it on my blog in a few cases. The one that I hear the most about is I have a dark light toggle, essentially switching from dark mode to light mode. And the sound makes the sound of like flipping a light switch, which I think catches people off guard because you're not used to hearing things on the web. I think that sound on the web has kind of a bad rap. That, it started in the 90s with people auto-playing MIDI tracks in the background. And remember that? You go to a website and it starts playing cheesy MIDI music. I think that a lot of people have gotten scared. And like the other place that you see sound, and you don't see this anymore because browsers don't allow it, but like those little like banner ads that it's like, hey, like kill the monkey, and it's making all these obnoxious noises.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of like bad historical stuff when it comes to sound on the web. And I think that has like made people reluctant to use it. But I find it adds a lot to an experience, right? Like we have all of these, we're like sensory beings as humans on the planet. And mobile apps take advantage of 3 of our senses because you can see it, it makes sound, and it vibrates. You can feel it in your hand. And the web typically only uses 1, right? It only shows you stuff. So I think it's powerful to be able to have these little sounds that, I use them mostly on interaction. So when you click on a button, I have these little tags that when you mouse over them, it makes a little popping noise. I have like a little drop down that it makes like a whoop sound as it opens. Yeah, I think that stuff like that, it's relatively minor, right? Like it's not overbearing. The other one that I found people really like is when you subscribe to my newsletter, it makes like a trumpet blaring sound. Like it makes like a celebratory, like the sound of like winning a battle in Final Fantasy, that kind of a sound.
Where do you get these sounds? Like how do you acquire an appropriate sound for these things?
So I actually went to school for audio recording technology. So I have a background in audio. So I've recorded some of them myself. But there is a fantastic resource called freesound.org, all one word, no dashes or anything. And you do have to sign up for an account, but it has like hundreds of thousands of both like free in terms of you don't pay for them, but also royalty free, which is you can use them commercially or however you want with no attribution. Most of the sounds are not good because it's not curated at all. It's just anyone can upload anything that they want. So it does often, there's like a bit of sifting involved where for the horn, for example, which I definitely did not record myself, I think I searched for like trumpet and victory, and I went through probably like 10, 12 pages before finding one that I thought was nice. Yeah, but freesound.org is definitely, and there is like, I don't even know what they're called. I think Audio Jungle might be one of them. There's these like paid services that generally have much better sounds, but you have to pay for them. You license them essentially.
Yeah, it's kind of like the difference between Egghead and YouTube, right? It's like with Egghead, you're paying for the curation and the high quality stuff, but with YouTube, it's free, but now you have to sift through everything to find something good. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, that's fascinating. It almost feels like your website is a game in some ways. Like it's an educational game where I can go be educated, but also enjoy the experience through these just little, like I really love the idea of you invoking an emotion in me as I'm working through your website or whatever, wherever the whimsy applies. Like a really great example that I super wish that I'd been recording my screen when it happened was when I got Discord Nitro. So it's like the paid thing and you get some perks and stuff. But that purchasing experience is like, if anybody listening doesn't have Discord Nitro and has been thinking about it, make sure you record your screen as you go through that, because it is so cool. Uh, just it's almost like, it really does feel like you're playing a game as you're going through this experience, and that makes a lot of sense for Discord.
Right.
But I think that you know, when properly applied, it makes the whole experience a more positive one, where I'm paying money to this company to so I can you know, have things, and I want to do that, but by the end of it, I'm happy that I did, because I had this fun experience that they offered me, which I wasn't expecting or planning on, or that's not why I did it. But it made the whole experience more pleasant, and I can talk with you about it in a pleasant way too.
Yeah, it really colors how you see the product or company, right? Like it makes you feel a little bit better about the thing that you've just done. I also think that part of it is that, and this can be said for sound as well, it's rare, right? Like most things are not like that. And I think that that's an advantage for people that do want to start doing stuff like this, because you know, if every website had sound, first of all, it'd be kind of annoying, I think. But it would also, you get used to it and it would just be a typical experience. Whereas like right now, it's something that can help you stand out. One of the things I did too, which almost veers into the sinister lane maybe a little bit, is on my blog, I have, I have a bunch of conditions, but like if you haven't seen it before, if you scrolled a certain amount of time has passed, a little avatar that I have myself kind of pops in from the side and asks if you want to like learn more about something I'm doing. And it's like a newsletter opt-in. And I added this worrying that, because, you know, like I hate when you're scrolling and like, bam, a modal's in your face, which is like, join our newsletter.
Yeah.
So I did this just like thinking, like wondering if it would actually annoy people. And so far I've heard from about 5 or 6 people about it who were delighted by it and told me that like, that's why they joined my newsletter. And no one has complained about it. It did double my newsletter conversions. So it was like
Yeah.
pretty impactful without being annoying, which is like, you know, that's, and certainly if maybe it will become annoying and like I might, it's very much, it's still even though I've removed the like A/B testing code that I had for it. I may still get rid of it at some point because I imagine that it might get annoying. But it just goes to show that like, you know, and granted, I'm not like when I say sinister, like my newsletter itself is very seldomly sent, and I think reasonably, like, you know, I'm not like doing anything sinister with their email. It's just, you know, it's taking something that often annoys people and trying to find a way to put like a nicer spin on it.
Yeah. And I think that I kind of have a couple of thoughts around this, but when I release a course like Epic React, like most of the people watching this, or many of the people watching this, probably experienced this, where as I'm gearing up for releasing, I send a just ridiculous amount of emails, just because every single time after the sale is over or whatever, I always get many people saying, I had no idea. And I look at the history, I'm like, I literally sent you like a bunch of emails, and I see that you open this. Like, I don't understand. But you know, I just want to make sure that people don't miss out. And so to make it less annoying, because those kinds of things kind of are, first of all, like there's a very clear link that says like, I don't want to get any more notifications about this. But then also I try to make each email useful in its own right. So there will be like actual content that people could appreciate, even if it's not, if they aren't appreciating the sales pitch, they at least get some usefulness out of it. So I can see how whimsy, like there's some things that just are not pleasant for people. You know, some things that you want to do that many people will appreciate, otherwise you wouldn't do it, but some people won't. And so for that category of people, you can at least deaden the pain, I guess, or the frustration by making it giving it some other redeemable quality. And
Yeah.
whimsy kind of makes sense for that.
I would say that there's like, whimsy is a subgenre of this idea of like always trying to provide value. So it's you know, you're trying never to just market for the sake of your own benefit. You want to have something that's good for everybody. And I think one way to do that is to like provide knowledge that is helpful. Another way, and I mean, ideally you do both of these things, but like to make it whimsical as well, so that it's, even if maybe the content isn't the most salient for a person, at least like they had a nice little moment of like, oh, that's nice. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah.
Yeah, and potentially even something that they would share with other people and be
Mm,
like, "Hey, this is cool." Another thing that you said that reminded me of something was how whimsy can kind of um, package things in a nice way. Like it gives a sense of quality. And I was having a conversation with someone the other day about Epic React, and my course material is all like really well designed and stuff, but I didn't do it. I'm not a designer. But the analogy that I made was the person who did design everything to make the course material look nice. His name's Vojta. He's amazing. And he does like most of the design for Epic React stuff.
cool.
And the analogy that I use is like, let's say you have this ice cream sundae that's just super delicious. But what I was doing was I was putting that in a shoebox and giving it to you and like, enjoy this ice cream sundae. But then he swapped out that shoebox for this beautiful glass, bowl.
Right.
And the taste of the ice cream is totally unchanged by its container, but the container like completely changes your experience in even eating the ice cream. You will assume or like your brain will naturally think that the ice cream in the glass bowl is tastes better just because of the presentation.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that there's a lot of it has like a surprisingly deep impact, right? The presentation of something really affects your experience of it. And I mean, I do think that there's Sarah Drasner had that blog post recently, like in defense of fussy websites, which is she was saying that like, and I was very, very honored that my site was mentioned as one of these examples, that when you have a site that really pays attention to the details and really kind of adds these little flourishes, it makes people more interested in the content, even if the content is the same, right? So my blog posts in one way, like, and I have an RSS feed, so I'm sure some people do get this experience, although a lot of my posts don't really work in RSS, so I just wind up like linking to my site if there's like interactive widgets or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
but like for the ones that are just articles, because I kind of have two variants of blog post, I do think that there's the experience of reading them is better on the site than it would be just as plain text in an email that you're like in your RSS reader. Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said for that. And Sarah Drasner in that article, it's on CSS Tricks. I'm sure if you Google fussy websites, you'll find it. Has a couple other examples of just like sites that really put effort into it, and hopefully, at least I believe that it has the effect of increasing how much people pay attention to it, retain the information, are interested in it, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think that it does. It makes sense. And aside from all of that, I think it's probably just like, so I can't really speak from experience because I haven't worked a lot in Whimsy, and I get frustrated when I try to make something look nice or animate something, or like I just struggle with that aspect. I can duplicate a design, but I can't come up with one very well.
Hmm.
So I can't speak from too much experience, but my guess is that it's just incredibly satisfying when you've got it done, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I would say that there's two things. One is I do get like I do all my own designing, and I don't really consider myself like a, mind you, I did pay like the 3D avatar I didn't make. I did commission that. But the
It looks
actual like
awesome. Yeah, well done.
yeah, I was super happy. Um, yeah, so like the actual designing I find challenging, but ultimately very rewarding. There's something nice when it comes to like having an idea and then being the one that sees it through like ideation all the way through to implementation, where it's like you've like molded this idea in your head into a tangible thing that exists. The other thing I would say is that the kinds of animations, like there's really interesting subgenres in interactions and animations of just like from a purely technical perspective. Like a lot of what I wind up doing either uses Canvas, which is interesting and neat and kind of a whole different way of thinking about how you put stuff on the screen, or
Mm.
SVGs, which are like an incredibly deeply interesting well of stuff. Like I learned a little bit about Bezier curves and how to like manipulate curves to do stuff. And I've been learning recently about filters, that there's all kinds of filters that do all kinds of things, and they're absolutely wild. Like a lot of the like really fancy effects that you'll see on the web use that. There's also like WebGL and Three.js and all of that. Just like the most fun I have technically is often implementing these little things because they get to like, you get to use math for one, which isn't something you have a ton of opportunity. Like one of the things on my site is the like button is like personified. So it has like two little eyes, and the eyes track your cursor as your cursor moves around it.
That's
And
great.
it's fun. Yeah, it's and it gets like if you move near it and move away, it gets sad, like without clicking
Oh,
on it.
that's awesome.
It's also the silliest thing because like on Medium, the like button serves a concrete purpose, which is if people like it, it sends a signal to the algorithm to like surface this article. I'm the only author on my site, so the like button does nothing other than like make me feel good. Like it has no concrete value, but people seem to like it, and I really enjoyed building it. But yeah, like for that, right? It's almost, I mean, it's not like a terribly advanced mathematical thing, but there is like if your cursor is here and your center of your heart is here, you want to shift the eyes in that direction by a little bit. So you have to like work out the angle and then do the like use Pythagoras to figure out the delta x and the delta y. Like there's like interesting like middle school, high school math in there that's always like you get to feel good. I actually use trigonometry sometimes too, which is it's always like that's like the stereotypical like when you're in ninth grade, like when am I ever going to use this? What's the point of this? And it's like, oh, actually, I should have paid more attention because that stuff would have been. I had to relearn that stuff when I was because I used to work at Khan Academy, and when I was between accepting the offer and starting work, I decided to just use Khan Academy to get a sense of the product. And I relearned trigonometry, which wound up, it's something that I use fairly often now, that it opened this new, like, that's how I do all these things that I've thought about doing. So, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Sounds like a lot of fun. So aside from learning trigonometry, what are some good resources for people who want to get started building Whimsy stuff, like me?
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer to this because the truth is that I've figured a lot of this out just through experimentation and like on the moment Googling. I will say that someone who also used to work at Khan Academy, Jamie Wong, has a blog post on Bezier curves. There's also a primer to Bezier curves by someone named Pomax, which those two articles together are like everything you would need to know about Bezier curves and more. So if ever you want to do like swoops, and especially if those swoops are supposed to move in some ways, like I did one thing where it was a ball and the ball was just like wiggly and jiggly, like a bubble in the air. For that, knowing about curves is super useful. And those, well, I guess Jamie's whole blog and then the Pomax article are good starts. The trouble too is that it's actually like surprisingly vast, right? Like there's a really cool project called React 3 Fiber, which is essentially just React bindings for Three.js, which is a library you can use to do 3D stuff on the web. I used it when I built a Beat Saber editor because I wanted to make my own maps for Beat Saber.
What? That's awesome.
That was a fun project. Yeah, especially because like the existing editors, they're in 3D, right? Because you have blocks in 3D space and you can scroll through time and the blocks come towards you. Yeah, and it was honestly, like I had learned a little bit of Three.js before that, and that helped. But the React bindings made it actually not too bad. Like you can pretty much just get started with it. My most recent talk was about this, and it was, I'm trying to remember, it was React Europe of this year, the remote React Europe. I spoke about the experience building that Beat Saber editor, but it also serves as an intro to React 3 Fiber and Three.js. So I'd say that's actually a pretty good resource if you're interested in doing anything 3D. I think that there's a lot of like interesting and unexplored territory in using 3D elements more commonly. Like for example, what if you had form inputs and the inputs were actually like 3D blocks, and as you scrolled, they would pan through in the way that 3D objects do. Granted, the accessibility on that would be a little tricky and definitely something not to neglect. But you could even just use like a regular input that's just transparent and sitting in front of it. So you wouldn't have to like redefine an input. Yeah, I don't have any, like, it would be cool if there was like intro to Whimsy, like Whimsy 101. But the truth is that there's all kinds of different directions you can take it that are pretty mutually exclusive. Like whether you want to do something with SVGs or Canvas, the tool chain and like the go-to APIs that you would use are totally different. And the use cases themselves are slightly different. I will just say, because this is something that I wish I had known a long time ago, there's this debate of like SVG versus Canvas. I only reach for Canvas if I need more than like 15 things to move at a time, because Canvas doesn't, like SVG elements are DOM elements. And if you try moving a bunch of DOM elements, there's just like a bottleneck there, whereas Canvas, it's just pixels. So you can move as many things as you want. So that's what I would say. If anyone's debating SVG versus Canvas, depends on how many things you want to move.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's awesome. Was there anything else that I didn't like ask you about, or we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention about Whimsy and React and anything?
Yeah, I don't think so. The one thing I would say is I think that like Whimsy in my mind is kind of three pieces. It's like the unexpected delight, which I guess is the fundamental thing. And then the way that you actually do that is through animations and or interactions. So like, you know, you can have an interaction that doesn't technically animate, and you can have an animation that just runs when the page loads. Interactions are like, the more interactive you can make something, the more valuable it is. This is like a core belief of mine. A long time ago, I made an intro to waveforms, which was just essentially like sound theory 101, like how sound moves through the air. But I was able to use, like, I gave the person a graph of like what the sound wave looked like. And also there was a couple other visualizations and sliders. And then you drag the slider, and it allows you to like play with the idea and get comfortable like at an intuitive level with the mental model of, because, you know, it's one thing to like read a bunch of words and to like say, okay, that kind of makes sense. Like I understand all of these words and have a vague sense of how they all fit together. It's another thing to be like, so like this parameter affects that parameter, and I can see that visually when I drag this slider. So I think that there is, it's a weird timing thing, because when this video is being viewed, it will be in the past, but it's currently in the future. There's MDXConf in late August, which has a bunch of talkers about MDX. And MDX, which is just Markdown with JavaScript with JSX built in, is a great tool for doing this kind of stuff. So I would highly recommend, if folks have blogs, look at MDX and consider using it to make interactive little widgets, because it really helps. You can teach something so much more effectively when people are able to like play with that. And it could just be like interactive code snippets. Like it doesn't have to be like wildly, you know, things that are created entirely from scratch. Just being able to give someone something they can play with is super valuable, I think.
Yeah, and MDX is a great recommendation there too, because like it really enhances the experience of the blog. Like there are just some things that you can't explain with words. Like you need different dialects for teaching some of these things. One other thing that I just realized that we didn't really talk about is like, well, we sort of talked about this, but I was wondering, like, in situations where some whimsy is appropriate, like, how do you know if you're going too far? And like, you know, giving people motion sickness or, you know, like, how do you?
Oh yeah, we should totally talk about the accessibility side of this. Right.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, the moment that you are moving something, you should give people a way to opt out of that movement, because there are people who get dizzy or nauseous or just malaise, as a general bucket term. The vestibular system, which has to do with like how your brain regulates balance with the inner ear, can get thrown off if things are, especially like parallax and things that like are drastic movements. There's a way to do this on the web. You can use a media query called prefers reduced motion. It hooks into an operating system level setting. So like in macOS, you can go into your accessibility settings and tick a box. And by default, it just changes a bunch of operating system animations, but web browsers are able to hook into this. So you can essentially just only specify that you want animations to run for folks that haven't ticked that box. And you can also set it up so that if people are using an older browser or an operating system that doesn't have that setting, the animations are disabled by default. I have a blog post about this on my blog, so maybe we can link to that, or you can just go to my blog and search for accessible animations. What else was I going to say about this? Right, in terms of like whether it's appropriate or not, it is true that like once you start developing these skills, it is very tempting to like use them everywhere. One thing that I think is super valuable that almost nobody does. So the first thing is that like it's generally seen as a bad practice if someone is like sitting and waiting for an animation. Like if you close a modal and it takes a second where the modal's just like slowly fading away, like especially if it's something that someone has to do often, right? Like you don't want to add any sort of duration to their workload. Like the animation ideally should happen at the same speed as whatever they're doing. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that sometimes that's just not possible, right? Like in my example of my email client, you click send, the modal folds itself up and shoots off, and that whole thing takes like maybe a second and a half. But I don't want that to happen in like 300 milliseconds because it would be indiscernible. So the way that I solved for that was I just kept a counter in local storage, or you could do it in like user settings, which is like how many times have they seen this animation? And after they've seen it 2 or 3 times, you get rid of it. So it like serves its purpose, which is to like surprise someone, and then it goes away. Because really, like you don't want to add friction to someone's workload, but if they only see it once or twice, it's not going to be disruptive really. It's only annoying when like I have this flow that I do 10 times a day, and 10 times a day I'm sitting and waiting for the stupid folding thing to finish. So that's one thing. It's just like you can opt people out of this, which is just track how many times they've seen it and then have that in your animation, which just shorten the duration to 0 or render a different component or however you want to do it. In terms of like how much is too much, And also just in terms of like animation design, it's a whole thing, right? Like motion designers are, there's like people who do that as their job. So
Yeah.
it's like hard to say, like it is a whole separate skill set. I've just gotten there through a lot of trial and error. But my general rule of thumb is like go through whatever flow that you're working on and just like, and maybe the best way is just to ask other people, because after a certain amount of time, like you're too close to it. You can't see what it would be like for someone that hasn't had that experience building it. Just like see how people react to it, like see if it's generally something that people enjoy. You can also set it up as like an A/B test where, granted, it's not like there isn't a one-to-one mapping of like I enjoy this thing versus I use the product. But you can, like I did that with my newsletter thing, which is if I had seen that a bunch of people were like just not interacting with it, or like worse, just bailing out of my site, like just leaving in disgust, then I would have taken that as a signal to be like, yeah, this maybe isn't the best idea. Yeah, I would also just say that like it's generally true that animation should be twice as fast as you think they should be. So like if it feels good to you at 800 milliseconds, make it 400 milliseconds, like just tighten it up a lot, because, and just like as a general range, like a 250 millisecond animation is fast, a 350 millisecond is like average, and 500 millisecond is pretty slow. So like often, that's not long, right? Half a second is not a long time, but it winds up being pretty sluggish when it comes to animations. And of course, like these are rough guidelines. If you have a really big thing animating, it makes sense that it would go a little bit slower. If you have like a really small thing, it should go a little bit faster. Yeah, so I would say just, yeah, that in summary, focus on doing small things quickly and test with real people.
Yeah, that's a great summary. Very good. Cool. Well, Josh, thanks so much for giving me some of your time and chatting with me about this. I really want to get into this, and maybe one of these days I'll add some whimsical instruction to Epic React. We'll see. I can envision a couple of things. I just got to learn it first. So, yeah, thank you so much for all that you do for the community, and your site as just like an upstanding example of what some of the things that we don't typically do that we could do to make our own experiences all that much better. So thank you for that.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's my pleasure. It was great chatting.
Yeah. See everybody later.
Bye.